Thank you for the opportunity to do a presentation on the 3 phases of financial planning, something that I'm very passionate about. And just to introduce myself, my name is Theoniel McDonald, and I hope you can learn something from today's presentation. I think it's very important from a client perspective to understand the 3 phases of financial planning, but also from a financial advisor point of view. If you understand these 3 phases, then it will make it a lot easier to market yourself, to understand who your ideal client is, and where you should be focusing to improve on your knowledge. So today's discussion is really about to debunk a few financial planning myths, which I'll start off with, and then I'll dig deeper into the 3 phases of financial planning. I'll talk about the typical advisor in each of these phases and what are the costs and that you can expect to pay for each one of those services. So I think just to start off with, let's just talk about the definition of financial planning first. So I think financial planning can be defined as different things for different people, but I think the most basic way would be to think it's taking ownership of your finances to make sure all your debt is adequately covered, your dependents are being looked after, you've got a plan to save towards retirement, and that you can leave a legacy. I think to some extent that summarizes what financial planning means to me. Obviously, it can be significantly more complex, but I think for the purpose of this conversation, it sums it up well. So common financial planning myths that are getting between clients and an advisor. I'm sure all of you have heard many people give thousands of reasons why they're not seeing a financial planner. I think the most commonly used myths are that financial planning is only for the very wealthy, it's very expensive and potentially unaffordable. For those of you that deal with entrepreneurs are often extremely busy and they simply don't have the time to put aside. Some individuals say that they will only start doing financial planning when they are actually earning more than what they are spending. Something that's come across my path quite regularly lately is especially considering it was Women's Month last month, is where women believe that financial planning is the responsibility of the husband. I think this is one of the biggest myths. I think if you considering that in some cases the male is the breadwinner, then you must also understand that it's the woman's responsibility to take charge of the financial planning. It's ultimately, if she's not the breadwinner, the woman and the children or the dependents, that's going to be the ones that are dependent on the person's income that would ultimately lose if he had to pass away. So I know there's many more. I'm sure many of you can think of many other myths. I'm hoping that today's presentation would just help you to understand the 3 phases, which would maybe just be that final piece of the puzzle for clients to understand the need for financial planning, and hopefully would then take the initiative to engage with a financial planner. Yeah, so let's make it easy by dividing it into 3 simple phases. First one being risk management phase. Second, accumulation phase, and the third one, retirement phase. Obviously, I think you can divide it into more sub-phases, potentially other phases that I'm not thinking about. But for me, these are the 3 most important phases to consider. So let's start looking a bit deeper. So the risk management phase. So the easiest way for me to explain the risk management phase is to remind you of the time that you just finished your studies and potentially you have your first job, got married, bought a house, first child was born. Essentially, that captures the risk management phase. And let me expand on that a little bit more. So often in this phase, your expenses are pretty much tied to your income. There's not a lot of disposable income. Once you've paid your bond, your insurance, your medical aid, your studies, or whatever those cases may be, there's not a lot left. There's not much left to save. So you're now working, you're earning an income and accumulating some debt, but you probably feel overwhelmed with all the expenses and you're thinking, how am I ever going to get ahead and how am I going to save for retirement? The reality is that if you are thinking and feeling this at this point in time, it's totally normal. You're not alone. People in the risk management phase of their life is often squeezed for cash flow. This is the point that you're juggling things to get through. You're making plans. You're just trying to keep food on the table. That's perfectly normal. The good news is you'll also get through this phase, which I'll talk about a bit later. So the important things to remember about the risk management phase is the things that need to be done are make sure you have a budget in place. There should be a plan to settle your short-term debt to prevent you from falling into the debt trap. You also need to make sure that you can manage your cash flow adequately. You must have cover in place to protect your assets, such as your vehicle, any household items, possibly your house if you bought a home, cell phone, jewelry, laptop. Those are the things. If you're a business owner, if you're a young business owner in this phase, then you need to protect your business assets as well. You need to have life cover to settle your liabilities at your death. Remember, it's often more liabilities than just your bond and your debt. Is after-death costs, there's transfer fees, capital gains tax, executors fees that you need to consider. You need to also make sure that you've got enough cover in place to provide for your dependents. You don't want them to not be able to keep on living, to provide for food, to provide for study costs, especially if you're the breadwinner. Very important to consider those things. You must have disability cover in place to replace your income and to settle any debts at the unfortunate event of a disability. Remember, at this point in your life, you're possibly young, started your business, finished your qualification, starting with your career. Your biggest asset is your ability to earn an income. Remember, your income will probably grow exponentially as you go through life. Not necessarily just, it will most likely grow with more than inflation. But if you had to become disabled in your early 30s, you lose a lot more than just the inflationary growth on your income for the rest of your life. So it's one of the biggest assets to insure. So make sure you have a medical aid or hospital plan or healthcare protector in place, and if you can, gap cover in place. You need to have an emergency fund available of between 3 and 6 months. And so the general rule is, depends on what type of employment you have. Are you in a type of employment that is quite difficult to replace? You have to lose your job, it will take you long to find something else. If you're in an occupation that you'd easily find other work, then 3 months might be enough. So it's a good rule of thumb. You must have a will in place. I often find that only when the first child is born you really start thinking about a will. Well, the reality is that you should start thinking about a will before that time, so that there's a clear indication of what must happen to your assets after you pass away. And then we don't like to do it, but we have to make sure that our taxes are up to date. So these are the important things to consider in the risk management phase. So typically, who can help you with these things? So short-term insurance broker or advisor can help you with your short-term personal and business insurance needs. Now, this is the house, the household content, the vehicle, your jewelry, cell phone, those type of things. How are they remunerated? Well, most often they earn commission on the policy of between 12.5% and 20% of the premium. Often a broker fee is charged when short-term insurance brokers give advice over and on top of what they're earning commission on, possibly doing valuations or visit the site and give risk management advice. That is often charged for by way of a broker fee, and in some cases they even charge ad hoc consulting fees. Financial planners can assist you with managing your budget, debt management, cash flow management, help you determine how much life cover you need, how much disability cover you need, do you need severe illness. They'll help you find a suitable product that will save towards an emergency fund, and they are often paid by charging an hourly fee or consulting fee. There could be commission on life insurance products or certain investment products. It's upfront or advice fees on certain savings and investment products. But just something that I maybe want to note on this topic. You must always ask yourself, if you had to lose this asset, can you afford to replace it And if the answer is no, then it might be worthwhile to insure it. So just keep that in mind, and that stretches further than the physical cell phone or the laptop or whatever the case may be. It's also your ability to earn an income. You've got enough cash in your bank to replace your income. You don't need income protection. But if you don't have anything that will provide for an income, then you do need it. Otherwise, you might just end up being dependent on a spouse or a parent if something like that had to happen. A medical scheme advisor will help you with medical aid, hospital plans, and gap cover. They're also remunerated by way of commission, and some do charge an additional hourly or consulting fee to compensate them for additional services that they render. You need an accountant or somebody that can help you file your tax returns. They'll most likely charge an hourly rate or a fixed fee. You need a lawyer or a fiduciary consultant to assist you with a will, your last will and testament, maybe a living will, and they often charge an hourly fee or a fixed fee or consulting fee or something like that. It's just very important to note that as you move into the next phase, many of these risks are carried over with you. So it doesn't stop when you leave the risk management phase. So as you go into the accumulation phase, which is the next phase, you'll still need to make sure these risks are adequately covered. But what happens is, how you enter the next phase is often due to the fact that your income still gradually increased, your bond payment stayed the same, your expenses stayed reasonably the same, and now suddenly you find that there's a bit of disposable capital or disposable income that you can do something else with. So at this point, you start feeling a bit more comfortable about your income, feels like your tie is a bit looser and you can breathe again. And now you enter the accumulation phase. I think the most important thing about this phase is this is where you start thinking medium and long-term investment planning. So just be very careful. I think the biggest risk here is that as you start experiencing that bit of cash flow freedom, that you don't upgrade your lifestyle. Often what happens is the moment you feel this, you sell your house, you buy a bigger house, you put in a swimming pool, you fix up the kitchen, and what happens, you never actually reach the accumulation phase. You get stuck in the risk management phase because you never start accumulating capital and investments, so you become more and more dependent on your insurance policies, your life insurance policies. And let me just explain it like this. If you accumulate enough capital, you don't need insurance. You don't need life insurance. If you've got enough life insurance, if you've got enough capital invested to provide for all your dependents and to pay all your costs, and you don't have any debt, then you actually don't need life insurance. So it becomes a debt trap. So if you keep on upgrading your lifestyle, you remain dependent on all the insurances around it, and the more dependent you are on insurance, the more difficult it is to start saving. So just be sure that when you start feeling that bit of breathing space, that you actually start accumulating capital. Start focusing on your medium and your long-term goals. So let's talk about the accumulation phase. So in this phase, you need to put a plan together to start saving for those medium-term goals. That might be different things for different people. I always use the example of that overseas trip. I myself still have young kids, and I can promise you it's been very difficult to travel the past few years. And forget about COVID, but just from a financial perspective, it only starts getting easier when you go into the accumulation phase and you start accumulating some additional capital. But then you need to have specific advice to help you to choose the correct products to save for those goals. So the medium-term goals could be saving for that overseas trip, maybe a vehicle, a deposit for another house, or something like that. So the most important step in the accumulation phase, in my opinion, is to have a clear plan to save for your retirement. So you need to know exactly how much you will need in terms of income at retirement. If I need 50,000 Rand in today's terms, I might need 200,000 Rand a month in 20 or 30 years' time from now. Then you need to know, to earn that income at retirement, how much capital do I need? And then you need to know, to build up that amount of capital, how much must I save monthly to get to that point? So that's really the key of the accumulation phase, is to accumulate enough capital for retirement. So you must also make sure that you've got a plan to settle your longer term debt. Remember, in the risk management phase, we focused on short-term debt. In the accumulation phase, you've got a plan to pay your bond off, to pay your car off, the longer term debt. At this point, you also probably want to start thinking about estate planning. So it might be that you now have started to accumulate some capital, your bond has decreased, the value of your house has increased, so now you start developing a net asset value. You also have some life insurance, and suddenly you find yourself with an estate of more than 3.5 million rand, which means estate duty becomes applicable, and there are so many technicalities around that, how to plan for those costs, the estate duty, capital gains tax, transfer fees, executors fees, and all those after-death costs that often is neglected. So individuals go and they draw up a will, but they're totally oblivious to the actual expenses that you incur after your death. And often what happens, your wishes don't get executed because you weren't aware of these expenses. So the accumulation phase is probably a good time to start thinking about estate planning. So who are the people that can help you with these services? So firstly, a financial planner or investment advisor or a wealth manager can help you with the medium and the long-term savings goals. They can help you do the calculation to determine how much you'll need at retirement. They will also help you to determine how much capital you will need at retirement and how much you need to start saving now, considering some variables to reach that amount of capital. So they often charge hourly rates or consulting fees, or they earn commission on some investment products, or they charge upfront and or ongoing investment advice fees. You'll also need a financial planner or a fiduciary consultant or a lawyer or an accountant to help you with the estate planning. I think a certified financial planner professional is well suited and probably the best suited to give this type of advice. So this is now considering all those after-death costs and taxes, and to make sure their solvency and liquidity is in place, and to tell you how much your beneficiaries will inherit. So they often charge hourly fees or consulting fees, and some financial planners could earn commission on life policies if a life policy is required to satisfy any shortfalls. So the end of this phase is when you now have accumulated this amount of capital to reach a retirement phase, and now you stop contributing towards retirement, and now you start living off this capital, and you now have to manage this capital correctly throughout your life. So I specifically say, once you have accumulated enough to provide you with comfortable income for the rest of your life, could move into the retirement phase. And the reason why I say the word could is I've found the last few years that very often clients that can retire still don't physically stop working and start living off their capital. And the reason for it is people stay younger for longer. Some individuals really enjoy what they're doing, and the longer you work and earn an income, the less dependent you are on your capital. You actually find people finding a midpoint where they scale down and work, but they still work so they can draw less from their investment. And this is such a critical point in your life. You've got a good advisor that can help you to plan this correctly, and to not just help you with a financial element of retirement, but also the emotional element about retirement. So I found that often advisors grow with their clients between the three phases. So by the time your clients reach retirement, you've also become very experienced in that specific field. But I must add that it's not always the case. You often find clients or advisors stuck in the risk management and accumulation phase and prefer to work in this space. You find the wealth managers move into the retirement phase. But let's talk about the retirement phase. So you have now successfully progressed through the risk management and accumulation phase. You've not allowed yourself to fall into the debt trap, and you've accumulated enough capital and assets to retire comfortably. Your biggest decision now relates to how much income you draw, the overall asset allocation of your investments, and the products that you use. So just remember that those are the three most important things, that you need to weigh up your budget and your income drawings. You need to pick the correct products to make the most tax sense. And then the final piece of this puzzle is your asset allocation. If you've got all your assets into cash, you probably won't beat inflation over a long term, and you'll get under pressure with regards to your income requirements. You put everything in equity. Equity is volatile. It goes up and down and up and down. So you might find that you're selling units in an equity fund when the markets are down, and it could also put you under pressure. So you have to find the right balance between equity, bonds, cash, property, and the same in the offshore space. So in the retirement phase, you now have enough capital to retire comfortably. You now understand how much income you can draw and how that links to your budget. You understand which products are the most suitable and also the most tax efficient. And you also know if you have a pension fund, a provident fund, a preservation fund, or retirement annuity, you know how big a lump sum you should take. It's not good practice to simply take your full 1/3 as a lump sum if that's going to result in big taxes on your lump sum. So there's a sweet spot. Somebody needs to help you to calculate what that sweet spot is. And you also understand the underlying asset allocation in your portfolio, and you review that regularly. So that's essentially the retirement phase. So the advisors that can help you with this typically are the financial planners, investment planners, wealth managers. So those are the experienced advisors that understand the tax consequences of the products that you choose and the ideal asset allocation, and can help you project your income drawings throughout your lifetime. And I must just stress at this point that not one of these advisors are more important than the other. In every phase of your life, it's critical to have the correct advisor that can help you with that. And in many cases, there's overlapping. So you'll find that you, especially in the risk management accumulation phase, there's often significant overlap in that specific phase. But it's important to understand in which phase you prefer to give advice in, or in which phase you need advice in. So if the concept is expanded on and it's made more well known, I really do believe that it will empower clients to engage with the correct advisors, instead of thinking that it's such a wide field or it's so expensive. You now know, I've got this need, this is the person that I must approach, and that's how I will pay that person. So I think the last lesson that I'd like to leave here is really to try not to be all things to all people. Find your niche. Become a specialist. We're moving in an era of specialization. It becomes more and more difficult to generalize. You're continuously competing against people that are specializing. So make sure that you find your niche and you focus on that. So that's it from my side. I appreciate you listening, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.